glorious gamers out there. Welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show, and while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, it just helps us out even more, and thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
It's going very well, Mark. I'm doing well. I have spent almost my entire day immersed in video games, which is, as you know, quite rare for me at the moment.
That is very rare for you, and I'm glad to hear it, man. Very glad to hear it.
I've had the day off work, and so I deliberately just set today aside for some hours-long gaming sessions, which has been fantastic. How are you doing?
I am doing all right. Sadly, I have had to work all day, so I have not had the same experience. But Lewis, what have you been playing with your day off?
Well, I have only really been playing more of Hollow Knight, and that's all I've been playing the last week, more or less. I have sunk so many hours into Hollow Knight now, Mark. I am making crazy progress. I feel like I'm finally on the home stretch, just about. I mean, I could be wrong because some of the bosses ahead are going to be absolutely crazy, I'm sure. And so I know it's still going to be a bunch of hours, but I am fairly confident / hopeful that by this time next week I will be finished, if not very close to finishing the game. So
didn't you say that last week?
I deliberately said last week that by this point this week I would be at this point, and that is where I am. So
okay.
I've got a few days off this week, and I think that means I can focus in on reaching that, which means I'm probably not actually going to play anything else this week either. At the moment it's all steam ahead with Hollow Knight. Today I have gone through some fantastic boss fights. I've uncovered almost all of the different areas of the game now. I think there's only about 3 areas that I have not entered at all still to be found, and I've got most of the skills, most of the charms, most of the upgrades, so it's just now the final assault. It's the march towards whatever the hell is waiting for me, and I don't know what that is because, as I was sort of saying last week, there's just a lot of names and terms that get banded around when people play Hollow Knight, like Dreamer and Radiance and things like that, and I don't know what any of them really are, so that's all still to come. As I was saying to you off air, Mark, I've just discovered some of the DLC content. If you've played the game, that will be an indication roughly of how far along I am and what's still to come. But oh man, Mark, I've completely fallen for it. It's a total joy to play. I'll save my fullest thoughts for when I've finally beaten the game. But if you have PS Plus and you've not played Hollow Knight and it is now available to you through PS Plus this month, do yourself a favour and try it. It might not be for you. You might bounce off hard because the opening few hours are really difficult, but if you stick with it, it is one of the most enjoyable gaming experiences I've had in a long time. It is sitting deep in my brain right now, Mark. I was sat watching the X-Files last night after playing it for a few hours, and all I could think about was getting back to Hollow Knight and what I was going to do next. So, woof.
Man, I'm so glad that it's finally grabbed you the way that I thought it would. It's so good. I'm very glad about this list. Very glad indeed.
And what about you, Mark? What have you been playing?
Well, Lewis, I have been playing Watch Dogs Legion, which came out a few weeks ago now. To reviews that were okay, I will say. I would like to say that I probably agree with the vast majority of those reviews. Initially, when I started playing the game, I was kind of thinking, yeah, this is quite good. I'm quite enjoying this. The recruit anyone system is pretty cool. You can recruit any single person in the game. They all have their own attributes, they're all named and things like that, which is quite cool. I also quite like the hacking system, hacking cameras and things like that within buildings to scout out your location, and you can set traps and things like that from the cameras before you go and infiltrate areas. I thought was a really nice way of doing things. I quite enjoyed that. And stealthing around with your spider bot is also incredibly good.
Nice.
However, that is basically every mission. Ultimately sort of boils down to that in some capacity. Particularly the recruitment missions. So anytime that you try and recruit a member of the public, you have to do a wee mission for them before they will join your team. And when we were speaking about this, when it was first shown off at E3 in 2019, it must have been, yeah?
I think so, yeah.
We were wondering how soon are you going to be able to see the gears behind this system, because Ubisoft at that time were saying you'll get a different mission for every single person that you try and recruit, but in actual fact that is not true at all. You get repetition relatively frequently, to be honest with you, and it is literally the same mission with literally the same dialogue.
Oh wow, God, I didn't realise that.
Yeah, it's said by a different person in a different accent, but it's the same dialogue, and they do overlap relatively quickly, I will say. And like I was saying, the missions do boil down to go to a place and then it's either steal a car, rescue a hostage, kill a bad person, or hack some data, then escape the area. Like every single time. It's always that. And honestly, that does become quite repetitive quite quickly. Honestly, I felt as though I experienced everything this game had to offer in like 5 hours.
Oh.
And I'm now 20 hours into the game and probably have got at least another 10 to go. So that is a real problem, to be honest.
But you've enjoyed it enough to persevere for 20 hours.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's not a bad game. Mm-hmm. It's not a bad game. It's just nothing special at all. Even the Recruit Anyone system, which I thought would be really, really good and really, really interesting, and it is to a certain extent, I suppose, but it's not the draw that I thought it was going to be, to be honest. Well, I'll sort of come on to that point in a minute of why that falls down a little bit. But I just want to sort of speak about another point of the repetitiveness, is that I feel that the game sends you to the same locations again and again and again and again. Like, it feels as though, okay, recruitment missions happen here, 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 and here, and then you only get one of them every time that you do a recruitment mission. And although the map is much smaller than something like GTA's, I really think that they could have used the map better. Like, I really genuinely believe that. Because I went to one location last night and I had 3 recruitment missions to do in this one area. And I was like, well, couldn't this have been in 3 different areas and with different buildings and different bad guys or something like that? But no, there was 3 things to do in this one area. I had to go into this area, steal some data, kill a guy, and then steal a car. And it was all in this one base. And that was also an area that I'd already been to before.
Right.
I just feel as if the game could have been a lot better than what it is. There's also some weird decisions getting made, down to like weird UI things, like when I select to track a mission from the mission menu, why doesn't that set a waypoint in my car? Why do I then have to go to the map menu to then set a waypoint to the mission that I just tracked? And I have to do that every single time. And you find yourself changing missions quite a lot, particularly if you are trying to do a lot of the recruitment stuff as well, which is what the game is based around, you know? It's just a lot of faff for no reason all the time.
Yeah.
Another point is that it is incredibly, incredibly trivial to get away from the police in this game. It is ridiculous. It is near impossible, I have found, that unless you are trying, it is very difficult to get more than 2 stars, basically, although it's actually 2 little weird triangle symbols in this game. But if we're using the GTA system, it's almost impossible to get more than 2 stars, I have found, because I have been like mowing down people on the pavement and it's still sitting at 2 stars. And also, it's very difficult to get the police on you in the first place.
Oh, really?
Like, again, I've been mowing down people on the pavements and just nothing. Like, everybody's just fine with it. There's no police get called. It's very strange. And even when the police are following you, like, don't attempt to get away from them by doing anything clever. Just drive to your destination and you will lose them by the time you get there. Almost guarantee it. Like, even if it's not that far away. It's ridiculously trivial, honestly, to get rid of the police in this game. Another point is that the game doesn't have a main character as such. It makes you recruit all these different characters and play as all these different characters. The story does suffer a bit from that because there's no one character that you can like hang your hat on, sort of thing, although I basically only use about 3 or 4 of the 20 odd that I've now recruited. But the game is supposed to make you want to change characters. This is a problem for several reasons. One is why do I have to see a loading screen every single time I change character? GTA 5 sorted this out in the PS3/360 generation. I really don't know why a loading screen couldn't have been cut out there. Like, they should have done some technical wizardry to make that happen, because again, GTA 5 done that a long time ago, switching between characters basically seamlessly within the game, and I really thought that this game would have that as well, but it's not. It's like a hard stop loading screen before you can start playing again, which just sort of sucks.
Yeah, definitely.
Another point, so this is sort of coming back to what you were saying earlier, there's no real need to change characters, basically, because although all the characters are given different attributes, in terms of how that affects actual gameplay, it basically makes very little difference. Like, it really makes very little difference at all. anyone can hack basically anything. Anyone can use all the gadgets and all the weapons, and anyone can hack or use all the drones, which are like the main things that you need. And crucially, anybody can equip the spider bot, which is like used in 90% of the missions, I would say. So having someone who is like, oh, he's got really good weapons and he has a quick cooldown for hacking, it's like, okay, cool, so that saves me like 5 seconds on hacking. But in reality, it doesn't really matter. Or this guy, when you get into a fist fight, this guy has like a melee weapon, so when they block, it does damage still. And it's like, right, okay, that's fine. That speeds up the fighting a little bit. But I mean, it's nothing significant. Like, you don't feel as if by choosing a different character, you're fundamentally changing how you're playing the game, you know? Which, again, I think is a bit of a problem considering what the game was going for. I don't know what this game is sitting on just now. Like, I think it's like mid-7s or whatever on Metacritic. And to be honest with you, a lot of the criticism that I have read about the game, I would agree with by and large. And I think that score is probably about right, to be honest. Basically, if you're thinking about buying a Ubisoft game right now, I would make it Assassin's Creed Valhalla and not Watch Dogs.
But you will still finish it, you think?
I probably will still finish it. Like I said, it's not a bad game. I've invested quite a lot of time in it now. It's perfectly fine. It's just not very interesting, to be honest. Like, that's the main thing, is that it is a bit kind of boring. It feels like I'm going through the motions a little bit. I don't even think that it's handled the story particularly well, which is a bit disappointing. You know, it's just a little bit disappointing, to be honest with you. It's not a bad game. It's totally fine. At the same time, it's doing nothing special at all. Like, I really thought that the Recruit Everyone system would have been groundbreaking and really, really interesting.
Absolutely,
and I still think that there is something in that could be really, really cool. But whatever that is, this game is not doing it.
Gutted. That's a shame, but not remotely surprised in certain senses. So.
Yeah,
I'm glad
well,
you're still
unfortunately,
enjoying it anyway.
Ubisoft has a bit of a reputation for being boring and stale these days, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Anyway, on that very depressing note, time for the news. Alright, news item number 1. Xbox have said that they want Bethesda games to be first or better or best on their platform. Speaking at the Jefferies Interactive Entertainment Conference, Xbox CFO Tim Stewart made this statement.
What we'll do in the long run is we don't have intentions of just pulling all of Bethesda content out of Sony or Nintendo or otherwise. But what we want is we want that content in the long run to be either first or better or best, or pick your differentiated experience on our platforms. We will want Bethesda content to show up the best on our platforms. That's not a point about being exclusive. That's not a point about us adjusting timing or content or roadmaps. But if you think about something like Game Pass, if it shows up best in Game Pass, that's what we want to see, and we want to drive our Game Pass subscriber base through that Bethesda pipeline. So again, I'm not announcing pulling content from platforms one way or the other, but I suspect you'll continue to see us shift towards a first or better or best approach on our platforms.
So, this obviously echoes similar statements made by Phil Spencer and Pete Hines and Todd Howard. However, I feel that this one is perhaps a bit more direct than those ones were. Again, this just gives me specifically, but I think a lot of gamers probably, hope that Xbox will continue to allow Bethesda to publish games on other consoles. I believe that this is the first time that we have heard someone from either Xbox or Bethesda saying that they want the games to come first on Xbox platforms. This is obviously something that we and many others have speculated about before, that the games might be timed exclusives for Xbox before they come out on other consoles. I personally still remain sceptical about all of this. And I'm not convinced yet that in 2 years from now, we won't just be seeing Bethesda games as exclusive to Xbox, and they will not be coming to the PlayStation 5, and they will not be coming to the Switch. Or if they are, they will be very small games likely coming to the Switch and not the PS5 at all. But this has given me legitimate hope now. I think that enough people have said similar things at this point that I'm like, okay, I can roll back from my skepticism a little bit here at this point, you know? It just remains to be seen if Xbox are actually going to follow through with this, I suppose. That is really what I'm skeptical about. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? This must be reassurance for you that your position was probably right.
I mean, hopefully, yeah, and I'm saying that from the perspective of PlayStation gamers generally, or gamers broadly. We don't want to see things consolidate too much, and exclusives are one thing, but to start talking about whole libraries of major games disappearing from other platforms, it wouldn't be great, you know, unless you are an Xbox fan and you only play on Xbox. Kind of as you said there, Mark, this is a fairly direct statement. It also sounds slightly more like strategic business language than we've had elsewhere, because there's been a lot so far of people saying, oh, we haven't really had those discussions yet, or, you know, we'll be saying things about that down the line. But this,
a lot of people being very very vague.
Exactly. But this line, this first or better or best, feels like it's come from, a meeting. It's written in a document somewhere that is their thinking about this. And I still think that will apply, hopefully, to all games coming from Bethesda down the line. So I think that we'll see Starfield or Elder Scrolls 6 on Xbox fully a year before it comes to other platforms. But like Skyrim was everywhere, I think you would like to see those things appear in most other places as well. The thing that it doesn't really cover, I suppose, is what happens to all the legacy Bethesda and Connected Studios content. Does a game like Doom Eternal, is that going to come to PS5? For me at the moment, there's a bit of hope here that it's not, a door isn't about to be locked, essentially.
Yeah, that is true. I think in regards to the legacy stuff, I mean, there is a PS4 version of Doom Eternal, obviously, and that PS4 version will work on the PS5. Yeah. Whether or not that's going to get a next-gen enhancement anytime soon, I would say is pretty bloody unlikely. But I don't think that the catalogue is going anywhere, I will say. I think if the games come out on the Switch or PC or, I don't know, pick your console, like that's not going anywhere, I don't think. I think that would be very, very anti-consumer of Xbox, and that is counter to their whole energy around the launch of the the new console. But in terms of the new games, I think that there's now legitimate hope, I will say, that they won't just be locked behind an Xbox/PC, and they might come to the Switch or PS5 down the line, and that is good for everyone, I think, genuinely.
Absolutely.
But I remain sceptical.
Stubbornly so.
All right, in news item number 2, a study at Oxford University has shown that video games can benefit your mental health. It is worth pointing out that the games that were the focus of the study were Animal Crossing and Plants vs. Zombies, which are two pretty light-hearted games, I think everyone can agree. But most interestingly is that this is one of the first studies to use actual gameplay data within the study itself. According to the lead researcher, Andrew Presbolewski, if you play 4 hours of Animal Crossing a day, you're going to be, quotes, a much happier human being, which is a very nice statement to hear from a scientist, I think. He also described the current psychological research into video games as, quotes, a dumpster fire, and very little hard data has been used in previous studies, and previous studies have tended to focus on self-reported information like playtime, for example, which is not the best source, as people are absolutely fucking horrible at tracking their time. This is just a human thing.
Absolutely,
Yep. Presbolewski also said that as the research goes on, they could use the same data analysis on games that are perceived to be toxic as well to see how they benefit your mental health. They are also hoping that this study will introduce a higher standard of evidence required, basically, in order to discuss video games and addiction and digital harm in general. As Presbolewski also said, this guy really went for the jugular, by the way. I absolutely love this man. He also said that respectable organisations like the HWO and the NHS have allocated a lot of attention and resources to studying video games with, quotes, literally no data, but have described video games as addictive and harmful, particularly on your mental health. Like the NHS and the WHO have both made statements along those lines, but their analysis has not been from data. And as it turns out, it's basically all from anecdotal self-reported evidence, which is total fucking bullshit, which is absolute fucking bullshit. So it is nice to see that after years of demonisation, video games continue to be proven that they are not only not harmful, but they can be actively good for you.
Yeah, this is a great little story. It's a great bit of research that's being done, and it's nice to see that some of the really outdated and not very accurate measures and tools by which people were doing this kind of research before are being superseded because of technology. Basically, what's happening here is that questionnaires can be linked up directly with gameplay data that is coming from the systems and the software, rather than, as you say, not only are people bad at tracking their own playtime in particular, but people also will lie about these things. It's like when you're asked at the doctor how many alcohol units a week you drink, no one ever really gives that answer honestly, because one, you don't know, and two, you don't want to know. And so it's the same kind of thing here. I think that this will bypass some of people's personal biases and anxieties about their gameplay habits and start to really understand things. And I think it would be easy to just dismiss this as academia or an interesting bit of psychology and that's all, but this could really start to influence things. You mentioned there that they could start to use this kind of research research to figure out how toxic a game might be, or to focus on quote-unquote toxic games, that could lead potentially to warnings on game boxes or on, mobile games before you download them, flashing up a warning saying this game is known to have these issues or to have this kind of mental effect on people. And as we've seen from Animal Crossing, it'll be much easier to identify games that can be really beneficial to your mental health, which, like, in the year that we've just seen, we and plenty of other people all tried to recommend games that could be beneficial in the pandemic and during lockdowns and stuff like that. Well, here's a way by which that stuff can actually be quantified and measured and properly reported on. So I think it's great that this is being done. It's alongside the kind of addiction work that we've talked about at length before around games and gambling and that kind of thing. It's just another tool by which consumers, developers, publishers, parents, teachers, health experts, everyone can kind of get a better grip of what gaming is, because it's fucking enormous now, and it's not good enough to be relying on really antiquated viewpoints of what gaming is. It's colossal now. It's ubiquitous, and we need to be treating it like that.
Absolutely it is, and I think that more studies like this obviously have to be done, and the more and more that we can divert ourselves away from these old ridiculous ways of thinking about how video games are turning us all into murderers or whatever the story of the month used to be back in the day, and how they're dangerous and how they're turning all our kids against us or whatever. Like, all of that just has to go, and it's very good to see that people are dedicating time to this and doing it properly, and that the science backs what I think we all already knew anyway. Alright, news item number 3. Capcom has been the victim of a customised ransomware hack, which has compromised the personal information of customers, employees, and even investors. Obviously, this absolutely sucks if you are a Capcom employee specifically, but also if you have bought a Capcom game over God knows how many years, your data could also be at risk. However, while this information has been obtained by abhorrent means, there has been some game details leaked because of this hack as well, and that's really the stuff I want to focus on, and I do not condone whatsoever in the way in which this has been leaked. This is not just someone within the company who's leaked a wee bit of information to someone. This is people who have maliciously attacked Capcom and are keeping hostage people's personal information for personal gain, and quite frankly, they are disgraceful human beings. However, because of this act, we do have some more game information that we should discuss. So, the headlines are that we are going to be getting an Ace Attorney collection for the PS4 and Switch, also probably, quite likely, PlayStation 5. You don't know how old this information is. A PC release of Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter Stories 2. Resident Evil 4 VR for Oculus is going to be a thing as well, which sounds absolutely terrifying. Although I suppose Resident Evil 7 was in VR as well, so they've got history with this.
Yeah.
Initial briefings also showed that Resident Evil Village, or Resident Evil 8, I'm still not really sure how we're supposed to refer to that, has a planned release of late April 2021. Also, apparently, Google have paid $10 million to Capcom to port Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 onto Stadia as well. There is also details of a new IP called Shield, which is apparently a multiplayer shooter. There are plans for getting streamers involved in the promotion of this game, has also leaked, similar to what Respawn and EA did with Apex Legends, I guess. And it looks like they are aiming for early access in September 2021 and a full release in March 2022 for that. And there is also new IP planned for the Switch called Guillotine, but details of this are non-existent right now. So, while this hacker group are fucking scum, quite frankly, and I do not condone what they are doing at all, and so far as I'm aware, this might not be the end of this leak as well. It seems as though Capcom are refusing to pay whatever ransom they are being asked for, and rightly so. So we might get more information in the coming weeks. Hopefully not people's personal information though, but we shall see. However, all that aside, Lewis, what do you think of these pieces of information that we've gleaned from the hack anyway?
Yeah, just to reiterate what you were saying there, Mark, I mean, this is not good the way this has come about. It's obviously highly illegal, it's shitty, and it must be absolutely horrible if you are a Capcom employee, particularly if you're involved in managing this data that's been stolen and ransomed. I mean, you don't often hear about ransoms happening in this day and age in this way, so yeah, shitty stuff. But all of this is being reported widely across games media, so it would be remiss of us not to be talking about it. And I think the thing is, it shows Capcom have got some really great stuff potentially on the horizon, as you say.
Yeah, a lot of it's exciting stuff, man. A lot of it's exciting stuff. New IP and everything. Really cool.
We don't know for certain how old this information is, so some of this might have changed, but I mean, a lot of it ties up with things that we do know or projects that have already been announced, like the new Monster Hunter games and that kind of thing. So there's enough here to suggest that it's all legit and possibly still the plan, basically. And yeah, I mean, Resident Evil 4 on VR is one of the best games ever. Certainly on release it was groundbreaking and changed a lot about action video games. So to see that move into the VR space, horrifying, but I'm sure it'll be brilliant for that. And yeah, to get an early release next year for Resident Evil 8 or Village, I think we probably expected that. I mean, that kind of March-April window has become... Like, Capcom seemed to colonise January before, but they've started releasing these Resident Evil remakes in that kind of March-April zone, so I could totally see that is exactly when they'd want it to come out. The new consoles will be, 5-6 months old by that point. It seems to tie up, and yeah, it looks like what's coming ahead for Capcom fans is some great, content that we know about, some stuff, some expansions on the things that we already know about, and some new IP, which Capcom have been so successful over the last couple of years, but with franchises that are well-known, well-established, particularly around Resident Evil, and to see them do some new stuff, I think could be fantastic.
Yeah, man, it's definitely exciting. I mean, I don't know what the Switch game is going to be, but when I read that they were making an IP planned for the Switch specifically, I was thinking, oh, hello, I'm interested in this already. Also, as well, the fact that they're getting into the multiplayer space as well, I mean, that's never really been Capcom's jam, really, I would say. But nice to see them branching out into that as well. I mean, I think any good dev/publisher can see that there's a hell of a lot of money to be made there.
Yeah.
So outside of fighting games, I don't really think that they've gone in too hard to the multiplayer stuff, particularly FPS or even third-person shooters in general. They've never really went in for in multiplayer. So I would definitely be interested to see what comes of Shield anyway and what that actually is,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess they had that multiplayer mode in Resident Evil 3 as well, so they've dabbled there with
so that was a nice
stuff.
little step into it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Alright, and news item number 4, Lewis. More launch games. Like last week, another batch of launch game reviews are now in, and again, like last week, instead of trying to cram all these into our shout-out section, we've decided to give them a bit more dedication and give them their own nice little news item. So, first up, Xbox exclusive The Falconeer, which is currently sitting at quite an underwhelming 62 on Xbox One and 65 on Series X. It seems that the world itself in the game is beautiful, and it does look stunning, to be honest, with lots of lore and things like that, and really nice world building, but the actual gameplay itself does seem to be letting it down, and it is quite repetitive. However, the game itself seems to have been made by a solo developer, and I think that is a valiant showing, even still. The game looks absolutely stunning, and if that has only been made by one dude, that is very, very, very impressive all the same. So, hats off to him. Unfortunately, the game does seem to have missed the mark slightly, which is a bit disappointing, so perhaps not the indie darling that Xbox were hoping for,
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want a title like that to take off at the launch of a new console, but like if this is on Game Pass, then why not give it a go? Support this solo developer, absolutely. And if you're saying that people are agreeing that it looks really beautiful, then, test out your new console particularly, see what it looks like, and then move on.
Alright, next up was Godfall. And speaking of underwhelming exclusives list, but this time on the PlayStation side, it's currently sitting at a 62 on PS5 and a 60 on PC. The phrase all style, no substance seems to fit pretty well with what I'm reading about this game. It seems to be absolutely stunning to look at, and I do think that it does look absolutely beautiful. But that is probably the end of the compliments, unfortunately. The story basically seems to be non-existent, or at the very least unimportant. There's basically nothing of innovation whatsoever, which is a bit disappointing for a launch game for a new console. This was the first ever announced PlayStation 5 game with no innovation whatsoever. The combat seems good, but it's perhaps a bit overcomplicated. Also, when it launched, it was pretty buggy, it seems, as well, and it had matchmaking issues and lacks a lot of the substance of even modern RPGs of the previous generation. However, if you're into your looter-style games and you're into melee combat, there might be something here for you. Although the critics have not been kind to this game, personally, the game does not look like it's for me at all. I was saying this long before the game even came out. But there have been positive reviews from gamers as well that have enjoyed it as well. So don't be put off by the Metacritic scores. Don't be a slave to the Metacritic. If you think this is a game that is going to be fun for you, then go out and try it anyway, you know. There's not a lot out there that you can get excited about for your new consoles right now. Like, the launch titles are always a bit hit and miss. But if you think this is one for you, what have you got to lose, you know?
Aye, as you said there, Mark, it's never been a game that I was remotely interested in, and this kind of solidifies that. But there's always people who want these kind of looter games, these online experiences, these multiplayer things. There's definitely better things to be playing just now, but if this has been floating your boat thus far, then check it out for sure.
Next up, Sackboy: A Big Adventure, Lewis, currently sitting at a 78 on the PS5. That score might not seem particularly great, but the reviews that I have read have all been very, very positive, in fact. And this is one of the very rare games that I have seen that the user review score on Metacritic is higher than the critical review score, and it's actually so high, it's a 9 right now, which, if you don't know about Metacritic user review scores, that is astonishingly high. Absolutely astonishingly high. This is very good, and obviously is aimed at a younger demographic who the PlayStation 5 might be their first ever games console, you know? And it's a great look for the platform as well, that you have something for that demographic to get stuck into as well. And also, I'm glad that Sackboy just hasn't dropped off the face of the earth, because the popularity of Little Big Planet has waned over the years, you know? And given Sackboy his own bespoke platforming game not made by the players, you know, I really think it's just a quite natural and great pivot, really, from PlayStation, in my opinion, and is a character that I think that they can build on, and is a series I hope that they can build on as well, you know?
Yeah, it's important to invest in your mascots like that and to reinvent them when you need to. And like you say, Little Big Planet isn't really around at the moment. It's obviously been kind of superseded by Dreams, never mind anything else, in terms of that style of gameplay. And so, yeah, putting them here, it sounds like it's gone over really well. I've got to be honest, like, it's not something that I'm particularly excited to be playing on PlayStation 5. I probably will, I imagine, because there won't be tons of new experiences to play at that point. But yeah, like you said, for that family audience in particular, and for those kids, who pick this up, this is their first console. I mean, this would be like our Crash Bandicoot from when we were kids or whatever.
Absolutely, man.
And so
absolutely, exactly.
To get a high 7 from that's good for a platformer often, so fair enough.
After that, Lewis, Demon Souls. Now, talking about Metacritic scores, this is sitting at a 92 on the PlayStation 5, which is by far the highest reviewed launch game so far. And the remake has actually got a better Metacritic score than the original, which was sitting at a 98. Quite frankly, it sounds as if Bluepoint have absolutely smashed this. They've completely nailed it, and have completely solidified themselves as the premium remake specialists, effectively. And I think that PlayStation should buy them very quickly before Xbox does. The game itself looks absolutely gorgeous. It seems to retain the heart and soul of the original, pun fully intended there, but brings it right up to date to a modern game, you know? I am very excited to play this. After my experience with Bloodborne, I definitely want to start playing the Souls series, and this seems like the natural next step for me, you know? New console, awesome remake of an awesome game that started the whole thing. This is very much going to be one of the first games that I play on my PlayStation 5, without a shadow of a doubt. Do you have any interest in this? And by which I mean, I know that you are interested in this, but are you likely to play it?
Good question. Yeah, I am interested in it, obviously, as being the kind of preeminent PS5 game of the winter. I don't know. I think that I will at some point. I would like to. I sort of feel like it will be what Bloodborne was for me, which was just this game that I want to get to but never get round to. We'll see, though. I mean, things are changing in my gaming habits and tastes, and this is obviously going to be one of the few games available at launch that is taking advantage of the full power of the console. So yeah, I mean, I can definitely see myself picking it up and playing it. I just don't know if it'll be right away. I mean, what a gamble from Sony to take to launch a new generation generation with a difficult and until recently a fairly niche type of game even, and it seems to have paid off massively. So I mean, what an achievement from Bluepoint in particular.
Absolutely, yeah. And it has to be said that they were obviously working with some pretty good source material as well in this particular instance. And finally, the big third party, Lewis, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, currently sitting at 76 on PS4, 78 on PS5, 78 on Xbox Series X, and 76 on PC. Basically, the story is fine, the gameplay is fine, the multiplayer is fine. Everything is basically as you would expect it to be, which is great if you like COD, but it's basically the same COD that you've been getting for years and years and years, and it's just a sort of cookie cutter formula at this point, isn't it? Let's be honest. And I really think that this is a problem with a lot of games like Call of Duty and Battlefield and Assassin's Creed, I suppose, but to a sort of lesser extent, although the Ubisoft open world certainly have a feel about them, let's say that, and as well like sports games. I think that the games that are clinging to these annualized formulas really are suffering at the moment because they have optimized their formulas so well at this point that they've basically got the best version of the game that they have, you know, whether that be a sports game or whether that be a first person shooter. If not the best version, the most marketable, the most profitable version of the game that they've got, you know. And I think that that's a bit sad, to be honest, because Call of Duty back in the day was groundbreaking in its multiplayer and things like that, you know? And Activision just have no interest at all in taking risks like that anymore and trying to do anything interesting with their game. They're just interested in putting out the same thing in the same formula in the same way every single year, making a shed load of money off of it. And why would they want to innovate? Do you know what I mean? Why would you want to innovate on that formula if it's proven to make you a colossal amount of money every single year? But in terms of the game, it's just become a bit stale. It's become a bit boring for me, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, great, if you're loving Call of Duty, if you love the last Call of Duty or the ones before that, I'm sure you'll love this one as well, because again, it's definitely from the same mould. But I don't know, I feel as if games like this should be doing more to break the mould and do interesting things and switch things up a bit, you know?
Totally agree. Yes, serialized games have always been, you know, swimming in sevens. They never really kind of touch anyone. They never really feel like they're trying to do that even. And I think it's telling even that Modern Warfare, when it kind of got that new sort of reboot a year or two ago, that felt like it was trying to do, even though it was, I mean, literally a remake of an original game, but like it was trying to push it in certain different directions. It was introducing some different ideas and some different styles to the Call of Duty franchise, but so telling that this year with Black Ops there hasn't been that typical, almost traditional big Call of Duty scandal. Like, what was it last time, the Corridor of Death or whatever, the highway of death, that was it. Yeah. It just feels like this game has just come out with a whimper. There's nothing about it at all, and that's a sign that a series needs an injection of fresh life, I think. Yeah, and it's not the first time that this has happened to Call of Duty either. It's not the first time at all. And it's interesting that in the sales charts this month for the UK, Assassin's Creed has actually outsold Call of Duty, and that is unheard of, at least in actual boxed games, and that is absolutely unheard of. Like, when Call of Duty comes out, it's the best-selling game of the year, and that's the end of it, you know? Yeah, exactly. So that is a big moment. It's definitely telling, but... yeah, I just hope that Activision do something more interesting with the series. Like, again, I'm not even saying that this is a bad game. You might even really like it, but it's just not that interesting, basically, and that's a bit sad. Yeah. Alright, and finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. Shout out number 1, Deathloop now has a release date, Lewis. It's coming out on May the 22nd, 2021, which is a bit of a delay considering we were kind of expecting this to be around the launch of the PlayStation 5. But nonetheless, this is very good news. It'll be interesting to see where this sits in relation to other PS5 exclusives, particularly Returnal and Ratchet & Clank, both of which we know are coming in the first quarter of next year. Are you still looking forward to this? Very much so. To me, this is looking so good. Yeah, I can't wait for it. It will be interesting to see where it fits alongside some of those other games, because it will have some competition there, but this is doing something really innovating, really cool style. I can't wait for it, and I'm glad it's not been delayed longer, at least. Yeah, absolutely. Alright, and shout out number 2, Call of the Sea has also got a release date. This is an Xbox exclusive that is a sort of exploration puzzle game set in a tropical island, which has actually a really, really nice art style and was definitely one of the smaller games that stood out in the more recent Xbox games showcases, you know? Do you have any interest in this? Yeah, I've not actually seen the new... I think there was a new trailer released alongside this announcement today.
Yeah, there was.
Which I need to go and check out. But yeah, from that showcase back in whenever it was in the summer, I thought it really stood out. It looks really cool. First-person puzzle kind of adventure game. I think, that's right up my street. So I'm looking forward to seeing more. Maybe once I've seen that trailer, it'll be totally sold for me.
This is a prime candidate for a play on Games Pass, if you ask me.
Absolutely. Definitely that, yeah.
Alright, and final shout out number 3. The 2020 Video Game Accessibility Awards have happened, and really I just wanted to talk about this. I just wanted to highlight this, I suppose. I'm very glad that these awards exist, basically, and hats off to Able Gamers, Stephen Spawn and Alana Pierce for making it happen. If you don't know about Able Gamers or Stephen Spawn, go and check them out on Twitter. They are both an incredible organisation and an incredible man, quite frankly, who does a lot of work for accessibility in video games. I think that accessibility in video games is a hugely important thing and a really underrated thing for the general gaming public, and I think that we could be doing a lot more to highlight better accessibility in video games, and I think the development teams could be doing a lot more for accessibility, and I think the dev teams in general could be doing more to make their games more accessible to more people, But I just wanted to make everyone aware that these awards existed. I believe that this is the first time that they've done anything like this, and long may it continue,
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. The more we see of this, the better. From awards to content in games to just it being a broader part of the gaming discourse, what companies are doing, what has been included in new games, all of that stuff. It should be featured in reviews more, all of it. It's so important, and it's great that it's finally feels like a big part of the industry at the moment.
Absolutely, man. It's definitely getting a lot more attention than it ever has done before. Alright, and on that note, Lewis, I think it's time for a beer, and then we'll be back with Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is, what does the next gen hold for PlayStation, Lewis?
It is indeed, Mark. Well, this is the very week in which the PlayStation 5 will finally hit the shores of Europe and the UK, which means we'll finally be able to get our hands on it whenever they actually become available to buy again.
I will desperately be trying to pre-order one on launch day. I have been promised there will be stock available at several retailers on launch day. If I miss out for a third time, I'm going to be so sad, Liz. I'm going to be so sad.
Well, you and plenty of other people, I suspect, because it is going to be an absolute bun fight out there. And that's because partly of how successful PlayStation have been in the last 7 years with the PlayStation 4 generation. I would argue possibly the biggest success in gaming ever. I'll qualify that by saying obviously the PS2 sold more units, but it was a different market then. PS4 has sold over 100 million units. It has probably the best library of exclusive games maybe ever assembled, maybe only outside of Nintendo's catalogue. And it has been revolutionary for the games industry over the last few years. It's pumped out some of the absolute best experiences that video gaming has ever produced. But, Mark, that has its downsides, and one of those is this thing that we've started to see over the last few months of a bit of a return from Sony towards this dominant position in the market and everything, all the negative stuff that brings along, where some of their messaging has started to be a bit more flaky. They've started to not live up to some of that pro gamer stuff that they were doing at the start of the PS4 generation after what had been quite a bad miss with the PS3. So we're now looking at the PS5. We're talking about two identical consoles, only differing in a disk drive, which is completely different to what Xbox is doing, obviously. We're looking at more or less a continuation of the strategy of the PS4. It's all about games. It's all about those first-party exclusives. But there's a lot of those coming. There's a lot of games in the pipeline. And there's some other little interesting tidbits that we've found out over the last few months about what PS5 is going to look like over the years for Sony. So just starting it all off, I mean, we have been quite clear multiple times that we are PlayStation fans. We've been PlayStation gamers since we were kids. It's the only console series that we've both owned from start to finish and that we have bought every single time. Yeah, so I think it's clear to say that we are both excited about this, but maybe, Mark, give me some of that nuance. Tell me, what are your thoughts about the launch of the PlayStation 5?
Well, as opposed to Xbox, who have obviously went for one high-end machine and one far more accessible machine, far more customer-friendly machine at a significantly lower price, but also at significantly downgraded spec. PlayStation have went for two absolutely beastly consoles, but one is all digital and one has a disc drive. That is effectively the only difference. And I think that speaks to PlayStation's wider approach to last generation and this generation as well, I suppose, in that, as you said, it is all about the games. It's all about the games, and they want the best games running on their machines. And we have continued to have conversations about, is the Series S going to compromise the quality of the games that can be played on the Series X? Because presumably, if you're Xbox, you're going to mandate that if you're bringing out a game for the Series X, it has to also run on the Series S, which, no matter what way you cut it, is going to hamstring development in some capacity. Whereas PlayStation have went, no, we're not going to do this at all. We want the absolute best experience on both of our consoles, and we don't want anything holding back what these consoles are capable of. And hopefully that gives developers free rein to take as much advantage of the consoles as they can. In principle, I like this strategy a lot. Like, I definitely want to see what these consoles are capable of at the absolute high end. I mean, when they're being pushed really, really hard, I want to see the difference effectively between last generation and this generation, and what this generation is really, really capable of. And the sooner we can see that, the better, as far as I'm concerned, you know. But at the same time, PlayStation have not been as accessible to customers that might not be able to afford these much more expensive consoles than the Xbox Series S, you know. And I think that if someone were looking at the price points of the PlayStation 5s and the Series X, and then the Series S is there, a next-gen console, they can run most of the same games, probably all the third parties that the PlayStation can. I think it might be quite an obvious decision for a lot of people to buy that cheaper Series S than it would be to get the discless PlayStation 5, you know?
Oh yeah, I think if you stack those two against each other, yeah, I can absolutely see that. Because you also, in the other direction, you get into a bit of a position with the discless versus the disc version of the PS5 alone, forgetting about Xbox for a second, where there's only about £100 worth of difference in that. And that, when you think about how expensive games can be to buy on PlayStation's own store online, which, you know, the all digital edition will basically be limiting you to that. That money is lost quite quickly, actually, the saving that you get buying one over the other. So there's an interesting thing going on there psychologically about pricing. I think that there's a bit of a statement there from Sony, to be honest. When they came out in that showcase and showed that they had one console, effectively just one with a drive and one without, that felt to me like they were saying, we really believe in our games and in the quality of what we're putting out, and there's no quarter being given here. We're not going to, you know, have different versions of these experiences. There is just one PS5 experience, which is bold and in some ways I think really good for the games, but like you say, maybe not so great for some gamers, at least. On the consoles themselves, so do you imagine over the course of this generation we will see different SKUs from PlayStation, either a Pro model or maybe more like a Series S model?
I think that PlayStation will do exactly the same thing that they've done for the past three generations. I think that we will see a slim version, and I think that we will see a Pro version. I think that the slim version will basically be the current PlayStation in a different box sold at a cheaper price, and the Pro will be an even better version. But I think that we're a ways away from them, to be completely honest with you. Do I think that they're going to bring out something that is a direct competitor to the Series S? Basically, no.
Why? Just because that's not kind of what they're interested in?
Yeah, I think if they were going to do that, they would have done it now. And I think that the value of the Series S diminishes over the generation. It doesn't gain over the generation. So if they're not going to do it now, they're not going to do it, you know?
I think you're spot on with that. It is all about that longevity of the box and keeping people in that ecosystem, which maybe Xbox Series S in particular could struggle to do at times if it becomes kind of obsolete. Speaking, though, of that comparison of Xbox to PlayStation, we'll come on to the games, absolutely. But first of all, just quickly, PlayStation services have been something that have maybe let them down a bit this generation in comparison to what Xbox has been doing to catch up. Do you see any change?
The thing is that I wouldn't even say that they have let themselves down, although PS Live obviously launched poorly, I would say, but basically came around, and a lot of people were actually really involved in PlayStation now. But I just think that Xbox are doing such a good job in that department now that it's basically made Sony look as if they're doing crap, when in actual fact they're probably not. It's just that Xbox are doing it so incredibly well and just putting out these incredible deals on Games Pass, you know?
Yeah, and another crucial thing to mention there is PS Now actually did have, possibly still does have, more subscribers than Game Pass did or does.
Yeah, well, it did for a long time. I don't know about anymore because of how hard Xbox is pushing that, but it did for a long, long time. Like, even when Games Pass was getting all the headlines, even when people, including us, were saying that it was the best deal in video games, more people had PlayStation Now than actually had Games Pass, which I think is more of a numbers thing, but I think in terms of percentages of players, like, I think the Games Pass is probably miles ahead of PlayStation Now, to be honest.
I mean, it's hard to imagine that it could be otherwise, and certainly if the numbers haven't quite tipped, and I think you're spot on there, that it's hard to ignore the fact that there's about double the number of PlayStation 4s in the wild as there are Xboxes, so that can kind of explain why PS Now would be outperforming, or at least was outperforming at that point. Will they change those services at all? Looking at PS Now and PS Plus, obviously we're getting the PS Plus collection, which I think is a really great way to start off a generation, but who knows if anything will be added to that. It feels to me like that is a battleground that PlayStation is miles behind in compared to Xbox, but that has a lot of room to potentially do something.
I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen any movement here really from PlayStation in a while. Obviously, they dropped the price of PlayStation Now not that long ago because it was ludicrously expensive in comparison to Games Pass, which was a far better service. And they've added a lot more games to PlayStation Now as well. And they're now doing this PlayStation Plus collection on the PlayStation 5. So they are starting to make movements. But in terms of like a direct competitor to Games Pass, like their version of Games Pass doesn't really exist, and I sort of expected it to by this point because Xbox are pushing it so hard and they've got so many positive headlines because of it, and rightly so, like absolutely rightly so. I really thought that we would have seen a more direct response from Sony by now, and that just hasn't happened, really, to be honest. I think that they're trying to skirt their way around it and do little things here and there, but there is no direct competitor from Sony right now, and honestly, I'm not sure there ever will be.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you, to be honest, that I thought that PlayStation would effectively have been forced into doing something by now because of the success and because of the headlines and the buzz around Game Pass and what it allows, the opportunities that it allows for smaller games to thrive and to be seen. I thought all of that might have moved things, and honestly right now, I mean, I'm alarmed, and I use that word deliberately, by how little we're even hearing about PS Now around the launch of the PS5. Like, it's barely being spoken about. It is not a big part.
That's very true.
Like, PS Plus, the PS Plus collection has definitely been a bigger focus for PlayStation themselves and the kind of games media. I would really love to see PS Plus become a bit more aggressive in comparison to Game Pass. Like, if they made sure that every month there was an absolutely killer game, you know, that is still close to full price on the market, or something like Fall Guys where they make the right deals and get games in place that, you know, that just bring a huge buzz and everyone wants to get in and have a shot of. I would like to see, at the very least, PS Plus become that, and that games get regularly added to the collection. But honestly, I don't think that will happen for years. I think that we'll probably see largely older games still coming to PS Plus for a long time. I don't really see any native PS5 games coming to that for quite some time.
Part of the appeal of Games Pass is the amount of games that will be there now on launch day, you know, that you do not have to wait. And it's not an old game when it comes to the service. It is a brand spanking new game. And I really think that is a huge appeal for Games Pass, and PlayStation just seemingly have no interest in answering that call effectively, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing that they do have, obviously, is the games themselves. And we've obviously spoken at length about the launch games and about PlayStation's upcoming library over the weeks and months of this show. But the games are the exciting thing, right? And I guess that is why we are both looking at buying a PlayStation 5 before we buy any sort of Xbox.
Yeah, I mean, this is where PlayStation wins hands down, and wins in a big way as far as I'm concerned. Even with the Bethesda purchase, I think that Xbox are now much closer to where PlayStation are with their exclusives, although we don't know if Bethesda games are going to be exclusive to the Xbox, as we were just discussing. But even if they were, I still think that PlayStation just has the edge here. Like, I really think that it does. I mean, I think that it's only bolstered their exclusives in the past 2 years, thinking specifically of Ghost of Tsushima, you know, and Marvel's Spider-Man as well before that, the reboot of God of War, The Last of Us is still going strong. They've always got Uncharted there in the background if they ever wanted to bring that back. Ratchet and Clank, they're now bringing Astro and Sackboy into the mix for the sort of younger demographic. They really are killing it on all fronts. Like, they've even still got Gran Turismo, their big racing game, you know what I mean? this is where PlayStation wins, and to me the most important thing about the consoles is the games that I can play on it, and PlayStation simply does have the best games, in my opinion anyway. It simply does have the best games, and this is really why I'm going to buy a PlayStation 5. And we can talk about services all day, and if we did, Xbox would probably win that conversation, to be honest with you. But to me, it comes down to what are the best games that I can play on consoles right now. And to me, almost all of them, and I kind of genuinely mean that, are PlayStation games. Like Horizon Zero Dawn, not even mentioned that, God of War, Spider-Man, The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima. Some of the best games that I have played in my life are PlayStation exclusives, and the thought of buying an Xbox and not having access to those games is simply not an option for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in exactly the same camp. There's so many brilliant games there. I'm a little nervous about the upcoming generation for PlayStation, to be honest, because I think that there are big shifts happening in the industry, and I'm a little nervous that Sony isn't necessarily moving with the times. But my God, if they can get supply of consoles and that 2021 release date both nailed, then I think that they're going to be absolutely killing it by Christmas next year. You know, if there are enough PS5s to buy and those games all come out, 2021 looks like an absolutely astonishing year to be a PlayStation gamer.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really, 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 really helps us out. I know I say this twice a week, every week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. If you haven't already done that, please take that 5 seconds. It really does mean a huge amount to us. And it really does only take you seconds. It really does not take a long time at all. And while you're over there as well, if you wanted to leave us a little review, that is even better. Again, it just helps out the show so much. And thank you to anyone that's already done that for us. You are an absolute legend to us. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Papers, Please by Lucas Pope. Now, I've still not started playing it because I started playing Watch Dogs and then before that Mario 64, but I will be getting onto it this week without a shadow of a doubt. Are you actually planning on replaying it before we do this list?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, because it's been a good few years since I played it, so maybe won't beat it again, but my intention is to do that, yeah.
Nice one, man, nice one. Well, I'm very much looking forward to playing it, and I'm very much looking forward to talking about it. This is obviously one of the premium indie games in the world, I would say, and it's definitely been on my list to play for a long time, so I'm very glad that I'm finally getting around to doing it. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.